Appear to be on.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi, and there we are. Hi.
We've been talking for hours, so now we're at that bored stage where we don't even want to like talk anymore. I have so much to talk to you now, Paul, about because I was actually thinking, we were just talking about the studio, and I actually was just venting with you about the worst parts of the studio. But one main thing I wanted to talk about at some point is the word fun. Just
Fun?
Fun. Yeah. I was really thinking, watching your videos, and I've been watching your videos for, I mean, I can't see them online. Like, it's not, I would see them in the actual gallery space or in the museums, and always want more. And there's a million of them I haven't seen. But one thing that happened to me in early September is that I had to give this speech, and I was so nervous. And at the same time, I really thought about everybody who was in the audience, who were all these people who worked for me. And I was thinking about my favorite part of the day is lunch. And I ended up cooking for everybody, and we would talk about Brexit, and we'd vent and talk about the news of the day. And it always seemed like it was getting worse and worse. And now we're in a position where it's beyond words. But there would be a point where somebody would say something, we would all be laughing so hard that we were choking on our food. The lunch would inevitably last way too long. Even for me as a boss, I'd be like, it's like a 2-hour lunch. And I was thinking about the fact that this is the main thing that motivates me, is these increments of time that I spend with people who care about things that I care about in different ways. But that it was the joy and the kind of the community of it. But when I looked up the word fun, I started to realize it was about being, it depends, it's like 17th century, but it was the idea of being a fool, or being a fool, or being called a fool.
Right.
And it even had some trickery in it, in terms of funny money. Like, I think a lot of these terms were like 17th century also, but then it turned into a verb. I was watching your video assured that you're having a shitload of fun, and I don't know if that's true. So I kind of want to ask you a few things, and then I'll get back to that thing, the story I was telling you about Prince.
Yeah, okay. So not all the videos are the same. So some, I could say those are possibly more fun than others. And then the word fun is kind of associated in my brain with like a kind of maybe more clownish or more jokey, like, or like more play. And some are a little more like that. And in some, it's not fun. It's not, the word fun doesn't apply. The word, other words do, like, I only want to keep doing this, right? So it's not like I'm at a playground. It's actually like, sometimes it feels like it's more complicated. There's something more exciting or more engaging in some way. So, but the thing of wanting to keep doing it and wanting to do it again, and to create another situation in which I can go into that world again, like I can go into that world. So it's a lot about wanting to create situations to go into. The painter is really particular. I mean, it is a tape that gets shown a lot. It's one that people like it's maybe funny, or I'm a buffoon, I'm a real clown in it or something, right? And it deals with the art world, and people want to see that. Like, I'm making fun of galleries, I'm making fun of the collector, I'm making fun of the artist in some way, right? So it has a, it's the closest thing I ever got to making like a Saturday night TV show, right? And I
Yeah.
didn't totally intend it to be that way. It just went that way, right? The other ones, it's like people could say, dude, weren't you traumatized from that? Did that fuck you up? How long did you have nightmares? And the answer to that is, I don't know. Yeah, I had nightmares, but I just want to keep doing it.
Well,
So
so
it's the whole thing now for me is to figure out, how do I set up another situation to enter that world? And that means I have to use the art world to do it. But I guess even that may be gone. Maybe the art world's just fucking gone. And how do I set up a situation to enter that world? So there's some form of pleasure in it. I don't even know whether pleasure is the right word. I don't even know whether that's the right word. Pleasure, pleasure distorts it, fun distorts it. It's about going into something and I want to go back. And so fun, yeah, but no.
it's so funny because the simplicity, I'm caught on this because I was thinking one time I saw you after I had done a video in my hometown. And it was one of the few times that I did a video with multiple people and three cameras. We're talking iPhones, one camera with a light. We ended up making a bit of a party out of it. So of course all the footage was complete shit. And one of my favorite parts, I mean, sometimes they didn't even turn on the camera because everybody was getting so drunk and out of hand, we weren't actually getting anything done. But one camera at one point always had my favorite person filming, Anthony, and I could rewatch the footage and literally hear him laughing at certain points, and he couldn't not laugh sometimes because it was funny. But that day I remember coming back, seeing you and Karen, and I was covered in bruises and scratches and stuff because I was doing all kinds of repetitions. And from my point of view, it was very painful. I was doing like these circles in the land with the rocks, with my eyes closed, falling a lot. And I, I remember seeing you and trying to tell you the
Mm.
pleasure of it was that all my life I had been dealing with this landscape that surrounded the house that I grew up in as this terrorizing effect. It was always the darkness, the fires, people out there from the insane asylum that was a mile away when they would come out, and helicopters. It was always this unknown dark place, but all of a sudden I owned it because I went out there and commanded the space, had agency, brought fun and pleasure, even though and then it was like transferred onto my body as like real, meaning it wasn't unknown anymore. It had gone through this like morphing from something untangible with no words to something actually physically now on me, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense. It's like, even if it's completely a falsified space, or I'm in denial about the fact that I think because I'm rolling around in the middle of the night, drinking vodka, filming, and I'm cut up and covered in bruises, that I'm so no longer afraid. But there was something about that night where, even though it took 2 years to actually, what I did was, that film was complete shit. And I took all the holes in it and then refilmed it. And I'm always into the repetition of your work and the slippages, and the fact that like the that nonsense becomes like a structure.
Yeah.
and and all this Freudian bullshit of like the repetition creating pleasure of it going away and it coming back. um but I'm sorry to like simplify it to fun, but I do like the idea of also being willing to be foolish, because
I think that's it. One of the things when I was thinking when you were talking, a lot of the times ideas come from a joke. And a lot of it comes from conversation. Like I have a conversation and I'll tell somebody, so I lie all the time. I say, hey, I'm making this piece right now. And then I just make it up, right? And there's this whole thing about being in a place where I have to come up with an idea. And I sort of create a situation where I have to come up with an idea. So I kind of make up something and I say, hey, I just did this thing, da da da. But so there's that side of kind of the bullshit side, but this thing of conversation and yeah, that kind of play, this bullshit play, but also conversation and jokes being a stimulus for pieces. That's a thing. So humor, and often it's around humor. Like there's a thing, and maybe that's because of absurdity. The other thing when you were saying making the piece around your house and the trauma around the house, I mean, a lot of my pieces have a party in it, especially in the last 15 years. I create a situation for a party. And I
Mhm.
think actually in those parties, and they can be quite, they're set up to be crazy. Everybody knows they're supposed to, let it go and here we go, right? We're having a party. Those can have real moments of what I could call fun, right? That you're in
Mhm.
a, you've kind of said, okay, we're having a drunken party and it's in my parents' house and I'm my father and you're my mother and we're going to have a party now and it's a drunk party, okay? And part of it is around this thing of childhood and trauma and the adults, and I'm re-being the adult in the house, right? And and there's something fun does happen in that, right? But the overall piece, which I want, like that's one part of the piece, the overall piece, which may go on for 30 days, that has lots of parts that are intentionally dark in a way. And of course there's a, you go into it and this idea of filming it over and over again,
Yeah,
it's like
I don't.
filming it over and over again is sometimes about, you could say it's about wanting to get it right, like you didn't get it right. And
Yeah,
of
I know.
course, the cameramen and all that, they're just faced with a fucking problem. Like, where do I stand? Where's he going now? What just happened? Where's she
Yeah.
going now? Like, God damn, she's in the wrong place. All this happens. And they're faced with that problem. And, and you kind of go, oh, we didn't get it. Let's do it again. I think I really want to do it again because I want to go back into the world again. And it ain't going to be the same one.
Well,
It's got similar situations.
yeah, but we're okay. So in terms of, there's like 50 things I want to say to you, but in terms of
Oh,
like,
let me just say one final thing about
yeah,
that. That thing of creating the world and going into it, and the whole thing of redoing it over again. I don't, and then what I want from it all sometimes has very little to do with any final product. Like, I think we probably in the last 3 years have shot, I don't know, 20 terabytes. Who the fuck's gonna edit it?
right.
Like 60 days, four
Organize it.
cameras,
Yeah, you can't even organize it. It's like
nobody's
the
ever,
mind.
who's gonna get to edit it? If Damon
But
edits, he'll be there till he's 120. So
I know,
it's
and it.
like the thing is not, like a one way, yes, I want to make a film or I want to make a TV series, but it's, what is it? It's not really ever going to go somewhere, I don't think. Where it goes, I have no idea in the fucking.
I don't know. It seems like you want to physicalize at some level the way your mind
I do.
works. But
I
so
do.
so but so to
But if I
reduce
make
it to
another
something,
film, it's just more footage on top of
yeah,
things
but
that
that's how
will
the
never be
that's
edited.
you're excavating, and you're also trying to structure your mind a bit and the chaos of it. But I mean, I was very interested in infantilism and these people who dress up as little babies and then hire, generally S&M, BDSM, whatever it's called, hire somebody to be their mother, and just simply restructure the traumatic moment, but under their every control. And a lot of times the women who do this, play the mother, say that the baby, the person who wants to play the infant, likes to recreate the same scene over and over. It doesn't vary a lot, you know. And they like to control every tiny aspect and even everything that's said to them, so there's like a script. And I really realized at some point I was going back into my childhood and taking an event that happened in 1979 and controlling my whole neighborhood. Like I was telling you earlier, it was kind of separated from the rest of the city by this freeway. And it hit me only recently that, oh, all of these gaps and directions that I'm just kind of filling up, and a lot of people haven't seen the work, is 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 me trying to control the uncontrollable at some level, and the again is a huge part of it. Um, you're reminding me, talking about the party and everything. One thing I was going to tell you last night after we spoke, I am obsessed with watching this TV show called Vanderpump Rules,
Mm.
and it takes place in a restaurant bar, and because there are no restaurant bars, but it's all about this young sexy, hot group of people. It's one of them. It's like a horror show. They Right now I can't stop watching it like porn, because they all have sex with each other to the point where they just make jokes about it, but it's all fueled by alcohol, and they put their mouth around the bottle of tequila and then share it with the next person. And then they get so sweaty and angry because then they all get so drunk that they can't remember, who said what, and then they blame each other for who's fake and who's real. And it literally has become some sort of porn for me now, because first of all, I feel like we're never going to see days like people
Doing
like
that.
their spit is on each other. And then I was thinking about, I wonder if porn is even going to adapt now to the sterilization, like meaning, or it's just going to get explosively, like I was looking at your old video, what was it, spit, here we go, I have this, I was like wondering, yeah, but I was wondering if the world is actually going to get reductive to like porn is almost going to be about just spit, like because it's like all these fears, or if it's going to get really cleaned up because we have to control it, and like it has to mirror how we can have pleasure now, and it's going to get very removed. But my point being is, I don't have a point. I was just thinking about the revolting and the pleasure, and my new porn, which is Vanderpump Rules. That was it.
That's it.
I was thinking about post porn or porn, because also the videos had gone from you, maybe with Karen, in certain times, her using the camera, very autonomous, um, bodily rituals of like, again, a lot of them repetitive, a lot of it language becomes so deconstructed and chopped up that like a musicality or a structure comes from it, and maybe something surprising, like uh if you in one of my videos I started to say household so many times that it started sounding like it was a household, but it also sounded like asshole. And
Yeah.
it was just like you just start going, and then you're like in it, and then all of a sudden you watch the footage and you're like, nobody's ever going to see this, but it's the starting point for new work. And like even when I'm sitting, so that for me, the repetition and for your some of your work working from autonomously, maybe with Karen there filming, and then going into these larger situations where I think the last time I got to see all of the films, it was White Snow, and it was dealing with porn and film and not video, and it was a very distinct change. And there is this part of me that's wondering if that the same looking, you don't have to say the word fun, but the drive and that if it's still equally there, if it's like the same plane, if you look back at the days where it was just you and maybe an object doing something repetitiously, like if one's more gratifying, or do you feel like it's kind of unraveling and you're still just searching even harder, like is one more satisfying?
I, I don't, it's just, it's a form of, uh, you know, progress, it's a lineage of time where things have gone. Like Painter, I mean, that's 1994. So, I mean, I watched it. I haven't seen it in a long time, and I watched it today, and I was thinking, huh, dude, I'm just not there anymore, right? Like, I don't even know what to say about this. And uh, I mean, that piece, Painter, was in a lot of ways, it was about the 90s and painting in LA.
Yeah.
And there was this whole debate between the Christopher Knight and Michael Asher, like who was real here, like painting versus conceptualism. And conceptualism was lazy, and painting was really where it was at, and decoration and the flat plane. And so the piece, and then the galleries beginning to happen in LA, and Rosamund Felsen, and money coming in through, Mike was in the gallery and stuff, so there was some money. And the piece was very much about me in a gallery and overhearing conversations and about painting. And this, it, so there was this thing that happened. And so I look back and I think, well, that's a lot about the 90s for me, right? It
Hmm.
may have some relevance now, I don't know. And then what began to happen was wanting to, like I made pieces in the 70s by myself a lot, but I wanted to really begin to make them with other people. Like I wanted to do pieces with other people, more communal. And in the 60s, I made more communal work. And it's really been a, a slow, a slow ramp up to these pieces that have happened in the last 3, 4 years. And how does the repetition exist now? It doesn't really, yes, it can exist. That kind of repetition where you say the same word and it turns into another word, those kinds of, or the repetition of an action, and where does it, where does it take you? Like you keep doing the same movement over and over again. Where does it go? And a lot
Yeah.
of that being about structuralism, a lot of that being
Yeah.
about, minimalism to post-minimalism, minimalism to body. I mean, you
Yeah.
take, went from Donald Judd right to Nauman. And it's
Yep.
the whole thing of the minimalism and the body and the psychology and the effect of the repetitive, not as a silhouette, but as a repetitive action of the body, and how that begins to affect the brain, and how by doing it, your consciousness begins to go somewhere. Like you're intentionally, by repeating the same word or repeating the same action, you all of a sudden find yourself, and you're responding to what's going on as it goes along. That kind of thing is part of, it's part of, like it's ancient. I think it's really an ancient action, an ancient form of a kind of transformation, and it affects you psychologically. And like I've been spinning for 20 years. I've been spinning since I was a little kid, but the last 20 years I've spun in pieces for hours. So this kind of repetition is particular. The repetition I'm talking about is almost like I'm repeating the whole film again, not just an action. I want to repeat the whole film.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
repeat the whole 30 days. By doing that, it's the same. I don't know where it's going to go. I set up the same script. We start to do it. It starts to go someplace differently. That's what I'm interested in. So it's
Yeah.
a different, and I could say, oh, that's an evolution of repetition. No, it's a little more complicated than that. It's a different form of repetition. It leads to a different thing, right? So, yeah, that's my take on repetition. I can say, yeah, that work I did, and now there's another thing, and the new work is something else. And am I still excited? Well, of course, because I'm back into something again. It's like if I had to do that again, I don't know what would happen. If I kept doing this, this is something else, but it's based on that past. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's why I haven't even asked you much about Painter, because I can watch that movie endlessly, and I watched it again last night and I forgot parts of it. And then of course I thought I was being smart. I was drinking vodka because of you telling me to drink vodka in my head. And so I'm sitting there drinking vodka thinking I'm not drunk, and deconstructing everything you're doing. And I wrote, like, I have the craziest notes, but they always look like this. But then I'm like looking between my notes at notes, like, and I realized that that's actually what I'm doing with video, where I make this whole thing where I would take me all day to watch the footage. So I don't even know if I'm watching the footage half the time or if I'm just remembering what's missing. And then filming between the filming, it's almost like, and then my memory of the filming. So really strange. The last thing I keep thinking about when they were setting us up for this tech stuff was that I needed an Ethernet cable, and of course I don't have one. And they were talking about choppiness. Remember yesterday I was saying,
Yeah.
like, everybody wants everything to be seamless, because, like, oh my God, we're filling in for the fact that we have no human contact. So here we're just trying to make everything perfect, and I was thinking about two things. One was when at the box, when Donation Grau did the subversion
Mhm.
lecture, and Judith Bernstein was in New York, of course. And so the tech, it was all,
Oh,
the
yeah.
tech was all fucked up. And it was so funny, because at least then I remember I was sitting on the floor drinking beer, nervous because I had to talk after her. But I realized, like, the whole time she was saying the word cock, which she might have said 50 times. She likes the word cock, and she kept saying cock, and then the footage would slip. And I thought about how subversive and funny the moment was, because it was like the cock was being sliced up. Like, the technology was like physically cutting the word cock so many times, and she wouldn't stop saying it, and it wouldn't stop dropping out. And then she ended up stopped talking because the tech wasn't working.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about when I first met you. You were showing me a video of white snow at the armory in one of the side rooms, and for some reason you were just telling me, watch this, and it was a carrot cock that kept being chopped. And it's like, now I can't separate Judith Bernstein's word cock and you showing me, like, I was so excited to meet you. I'd never met you before this. And Ali Sabatnik introduced me, and you were showing me this moment, this like carrot cock being chopped up. And then I was thinking how these things led to one thing, which was I was filming once out in San Bernardino, and my friend had driven all the way from Vegas to film, and she wasn't doing well. And it was just like wasting my time. And my parents had just sold the house. So I had like one night. I had to do what I needed to do in this time. And so the person who was helping me film was like, do you have anything on your phone? And I realized the only thing I had was a conversation between you and me for the new museum catalog from years before. And never erased it. Of course, I'm not going to erase that. So what I did is I put it in her ear, and her wig covered it, and I just kept slipping the timeline around. But I was literally listening to it with the other earphone behind her back and making her film this while I was slipping around our conversation, which was like a 2.5 hour conversation. And it became this unbelievably abstracted. It was as though that somebody put a mirror up to my head and I could finally see the way I was thinking about this whole project, because it was me describing my work and then you describing something and us talking about home and all this other crazy shit, but it just kept skipping like a record. And sometimes and I just said, say everything you hear, just keep doing it. And the point I'm making is, of course, that footage was no good. I didn't like that footage at all. But then I put that sound recording of the second footage of her skipping it around. I put it into the bedroom I grew up in, and we both got both sides. Like, it was a filming of the filming of it being chopped up now in both of our ears. And I'd be like, let's film it, do it again, do it again, do it again. And by the end, even that footage wasn't very good. But when I got it home, I realized that it was because it was cringeworthy. Talk about foolishness. My acting's not good. And so sometimes when I'm acting and it looks horrible. But rather than going and erasing that cringe, I amplified it. I took all of the cringe and edited it in a way that she would say, and I would say the same thing. And it was, I have to say right now, because it's the last video I ever made, that it's my favorite, because I couldn't have planned any aspect of that. Like, there would, even to the day that where she's just failing and can't, and then Anthony just happens to ask, is there anything on your phone? Like, we're trying everything we could do. And I'm like, here it is. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, for me, that did end up being a final video, because I had a show in Switzerland and it worked out. It's called A Place for a Snake. But to me, it was just about the urgency of, I only have one night to film here before this house, I don't have the keys anymore. And I just had to have some way to physicalize where it was in my head. That's, I mean, it's not emotional. It's actually super structural. And I always thought a lot of it, like, I get super obsessed with like structuralist video, but I like perverted structuralism, where you can't even, like, where I can't fully be in control of it.
And also,
I guess
there's this thing where it seems like you're looping it, right? Like, yeah, one thing leads to the other, and it comes back on, and I don't like this, so I switch it again, and it's like fucking it up, fucking it up, fucking it up until the fuck up becomes something. And I think that kind of process, when I describe what I want to make now, it it applies to everything. It applies to whether I'm making a drawing, or whether I'm making a writing, or whether I'm making sculpture, or whether I'm making a film, or whether I'm editing. It's all the same. It's this thing of looping it, and not being afraid to lose the whole thing. Like, that's a big one. Like, oh, that's pretty interesting, but really, it's not right. And then you take and you risk the whole thing. You dump it. You push it to something and you loop it again. So there's this thing, as you were describing, I kept thinking, yeah, it's like she's looped it again. Now she's looped it again. And each loop is dealing with this thing. I don't like this. Boom, goes back again, right? Until yeah, these things of how to, I don't know. For me, it's there. You know, it's not a structuralism per se in the Solowitz sense. It's a structuralism in the sense of I think it's a structuralism dealing with with a as fracturing as another form of futurist structural. Like we're living in a fractured structuralism, and that really creates layers. And whether it has anything to do, it's so subjective in a certain way. Like for me, even this isolation of this whole thing, it it for me, it's like art becomes even more um, subjective. Like I'm on my own planet. Yeah,
Right.
maybe, you know, could I? I don't even know whether I fit in an art world anymore. I don't even know that. I don't even know what it is anymore. But in a certain way, the subjective vision, whether it could apply to anyone on the outside, I have no idea. It's not that it's not meant to be seen, but in a way, I don't know how it's just like it becomes more insular all the time in the sense of what I'm making, not in the sense of whether it's shown or not shown, but what I'm making becomes more insular, becomes more subjective.
Yeah.
And part of that is, you know, like I don't, the meaning gets more complex and more nonsense or nothingness. It's not nonsense and it isn't nothingness. It's just layered.
Yeah.
Meaning is layered. The meaning
Yeah.
gets layered and layered and
Yeah.
layered.
No, and it's this is the part that even if it's impossible, talk about 80s painting when they were doing those, they thought they were creating like a third meaning by taking to who was that, like David Sally and all of them, the picture generation. I sometimes I feel like the only goal, I have to ask you some questions because they're texting me, but
Oh,
like I will. I'm so excited. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this person's name. It like came in. I think one thing that is important to say is 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 this it's I don't even want to use the word language. It's like this meaning that you can't, the surprise of meaning.
uh,
Okay,
yeah.
he's texting me. This just being surprised yourself in
Yeah.
something happening.
The
And I don't
unexpected.
know
The
the
unexpected.
unexpected, but I don't know. This is what I want to say to you. I don't know if it's, you know, when we were talking about earlier about looking at the news, I don't know. I don't know if it's like a visceral thing. I don't know if it's something we come up to and watch in our own work or if it happens internally. And or if it needs that external thing where you're all of a sudden two things collapse on it on yourself and you're like, I could never have planned that out feeling for me is the guide of like, I get serendipitous about it, but then I also get, I mean, I get spazzed out because I feel like it has like deeper meanings. The unpredictability created something so perfect
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
it's all this quantum things too of believing like there is no coincidence either,
Yeah.
or that it's already happened and that all we're doing is weeding through it looking, and I always feel like I'm either behind or ahead,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like getting into this moment where it just clicks into the now. But I have to ask this question. Gabriel Madden asks, I'm a terrible reader, I'm wondering what you think about the hallway connecting the two rooms, bedroom and the studio in Painter. Is there a connection, oh yeah, to your earlier Dead H work? Can these three spaces be thought of as the largest iteration of Dead H?
Um, I, I don't think so. The hallway, I mean, I think what I wanted there, trying to think back on what that was, I think I wanted a small, a very enclosed space, like a pressure space where you were pressured, you were in a hallway. Like hallways are interesting to me. I guess in some way, oh, well, that's interesting. Hallways, there's been two things that in those 60s period, there was a group of photographs made in late 60s, early 70s, where I photographed this, early 70s, I photographed inside a empty office building and then turned the photographs upside down. And they're
Yeah.
called rooms and hallways. And it was about flipping. And then in some cases, I flipped one photograph and put it on top. So it made like a kind of butterfly image. So this thing of rooms and hallways, and Dead H is a hallway. Um, and it's like hallways being something that goes to another place, like you go to a room. and and then the skull with the tail is a hallway. There's a hallway to the to the cube. So in that sense, yeah, maybe there's some connection to wanting a type of hallway space, a kind of enclosed space with the walls pressured in, maybe a connection there, but not as a void space, not as a space you can't enter. It's a space that is about being crowded. So I
Yeah,
guess maybe that helps answer that question. I don't know.
it does, I think. Wait, is Dead H supposed to have is supposed to have a void? The connecting space, you see it as a void?
Yeah, I saw it as a space. I mean, it came from, this notion of minimalism and Tony Smith's Die or the Donald Judd pieces, but more than the Donald Judd, it was the Robert Morris pieces. And that was that you had these enclosed boxes or, L
Yeah.
shapes or whatever Morris was making there. But it that form of minimalism, it was a skin, and once you made the form, you created a void that no one could get into. So Die created a void that you can't ever enter. And I remember like sitting in on a class in 66 or 5 and them talking about the essence of the shape, the cube. And I was thinking, well, part of the essence of that cube you're describing is the fact that it's a skin with an empty space in it. It's not solid. And out of that came the Dead H. And of course, with the Dead H, the thing is then I flipped it again from the Clement Greenberg sort of notion of, and made it about a body. And so it's called Dead H. H is for human. And the space in the middle of the H is a space that once I made the piece, no one can enter. You can't see into it. You can't see it.
Can't see
So
it.
it's
Yeah.
a type of void which is unattainable. You can't, if you look down the hallway of the leg of the H, you can't see into that center area.
Okay.
And the skull with the tail, if you look down this thing indicates that it's a hallway that goes to the skull, to the cube. But of course, if you look, the crooked leg creates a space. It only indicates that there's a hollowness, but it's a hollowness you can't ever go to. So that's what I meant. And in some ways, I didn't actually mean it as metaphor that we don't understand in an existential way, that we don't
Yeah,
understand
yeah, yeah.
who we are or who we
Yeah.
are. I didn't mean it that way, but or a void in that sense. It was actually more concrete as a void, but
Yeah.
it is as a metaphor, I guess. By making it a skull or making it a body, I'm indicating the unattainable. We can't understand what we are. It's
Yeah.
unattainable.
I feel like we get into like topology for hours, or this idea of homology where there's like a study of holes and in objects of the skin of things, but there are holes you can't see and they consistently morph and it's still the same thing. I mean, I barely, I told you I didn't make it through high school, but my understanding of this like advanced top, mathematics and topology is like one of my main interests, and I've been explained the dead age several times, and every time somebody has a different version of it. So that was great to hear you speak about it, because I've even heard collectors talk about it, so we could have a beer and laugh over that one. Nothing against collectors. Okay, Lucy Van Pelt is asking, what does Paul have against doors? And what is Kaari's thing with walls in her work? Can you both talk about your relationship to doll houses and childhood homes in your work? Oh, go
Doors.
right ahead. That's a
I have
hard one.
nothing against doors. I, I do. I don't think so. I mean,
What those slamming pieces and
the what?
I mean, the slamming pieces, that were those doors or those were walls? The hydraulic, the
Oh,
pieces, were those doors or walls?
walls and doors.
They're walls and doors.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Bang Bang Room is walls and doors. I,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a bigger question about what is and maybe it's a question for you. It's the question of architecture.
Yeah.
Like, there's doors, there's windows, there's walls, there's floors, there's ceilings, but there's layers of rooms. That's another one. Layers of rooms. And architecture, that's, I don't, I, architecture for me, I mean, it's a complicated subject. I guess in some ways I do have something against it, I think. On the other hand, it has so many, there's so much going on with architecture. I mean, we live in them. They're everywhere. These boxes, and they're boxes. They're primarily boxes at this point, or at least where my life in this Western culture is made up of boxes. And you dream about them people are dreaming about them all the time. You're entering one, you're on another floor, you're going down some stairs. This whole thing of architecture. And then there's this thing of architecture in the body, and that metaphor of the architecture as body and body as architecture, all of that. And of course, it finds its way either very directly in my work or architecture as body, or indirectly. And I do have a thing where I think of windows and doors in relationship to painting. But that's a very old idea for me, maybe back in mid 60s, that all the paintings I made in the mid 60s were referred to as doors or windows. And there is something about this idea of a landscape on a wall and it being a window, a landscape painting. And there's a thing about a portrait being a mirror. The subject of the mirror, the subject of the window, the subject of architecture, they're all, they are in my work. And to a degree, there is a form of critique going on, because I do see them in some ways as they have multiple reactions to them. But one is as a type of prison, or as an object that represents the loss of freedom. And then, of course, we don't know what freedom is because we're so fucking conditioned the day we're born. So it's hard to know. And to find freedom is a whole issue. So this thing of walls and doors and veils, they actually indicate something about an inside and an outside.
Well, yeah, it's the liminal.
Inside and
Well,
out.
it stands. It's yeah. The inside outside, of course,
Yeah.
and all of the work where the abject, we're going to just call it that because it's, but playing with once something that was once inside is then outside the body becomes disgusting.
Yeah.
Inside the body it's natural, and then outside the body it's abject, and it's the definitive line between outside and inside, or it's the barrier that keeps somebody out. I used to be really obsessed with the Playboy Gate because all of the bunnies, the girlfriends, always had to have curfew of 9 p.m. and it's like what kept the men out and kept the women in, and he Hefner's Playboy Gate, And I also am thinking about, like, very quickly, had seen some documentary years ago about Skid Row, and they were interviewing this woman, and one of the primary, goals of homelessness is always finding them a place to live. They just need a place to live. They need their own place to live. And this woman's words, I have to remember the name of this documentary, had never left me because it spurred something on inside me. She said, "Why would I ever want to be inside?" And it was like, and I'm probably not saying this correctly, but this is what left me. She denied, like, when in the interview, she never wanted, part of the reason she was homeless, obviously something very traumatic had happened to her. A lot of times traumatic things happen inside. And so who would want to recreate the scenario of that to her, it was like captivity. Yeah. She wanted outside. She didn't want, and when I moved into the house that I finally own, I realized the weirdest thing. I had all these doors and windows, and they were always there. The guy who built the house or fixed it, it's commercially decided this is what's attractive. This is the right wall color. And I hated my house so much. I hated the wood floors. I hated the maintenance. I hated the idea that it looked like a house, and I couldn't figure it out because I was having a really bad trauma, meaning I couldn't sleep because all of a sudden I had these windows and I had to get an alarm. And I was like, it's totally safe. Why am I obsessed with? And then I realized the house I grew up in, there was always something about to happen, and my dad would pull his gun out and we'd be safe. To me, the house, I never put it together. I thought I wanted one so bad that once I was inside the one that I bought for myself and my daughter, I was scared shitless. I was like, why was this a dream? But so the outside, inside, yeah. And there's so many great books I could pull off the shelf behind me about all of that. But
I do think that I've made, in the last few years, I've made well, not in the last few years, I think since the architecture and sets, the idea of making a set, like a place to shoot, to make the film, and to make a set, the house or the building or some sort of enclosure was really important. And these sets, these structures, I just made one which is to rebuild the saloon that Fassbinder shot Whitey in. And we rebuilt the entire saloon only to find out that it was I thought it was a saloon that Fassbinder built in Berlin as a set. It actually turned out to be an actual structure in Spain where Clint Eastwood shot a lot of the spaghetti westerns at the time, and it was the saloon. So it was this weird loop where we had we had rebuilt the saloon in Los Angeles, like in the interior is exact. It's a two-story saloon. And it so this thing of making the making a structure like that, and then we rebuilt the bedroom. Then when I reshot this night porter, we made a huge structure, another big set, and that's referred to as the maze. And it's really in that we repeated rooms over and over again, like Max's room from the night porter is repeated 2 times, the bathroom's repeated 2 times, the kitchen's repeated 2 times. And then we, but it's at the end of it is a room from the Beverly Hilton Hotel. But it's this structure of mazes and boxes and rooms. And there's something about filming in an enclosure that is, for me, there's something, it's psychological. Like it's like the action can happen, it has a barrier. I'm now filming and want to film in nature. That's, I'm, it's a whole, but in the woods. But I kind of know where it really happens is at night. And again, a kind of nighttime being a kind of room.
Yeah, well, so the video that was
where it ends.
Yeah, the video that was such a failure, the fun night, as I call it, the party night, ended up, it was a video, it was filmed at night, and it was called Night Splitter. And everybody's characters, I was saying to them, we have to think about psychologically what splits the night, thunder, nightmares, wetting the bed, whatever. And I was just trying to think about all things that split the night. And I realized in retrospect, I was dealing with the fact that my brother used to have those walking terrors after this big incident in 1979 where everything around us burned down. And so he would walk around the house with his eyes open, screaming that Dad was trying to kill us with the tractor. And I would be like, what the hell is going on? Like, and not realizing he was fully asleep. So it's funny thinking about like this last question, which by the way, they want me to ask you one more question. So I'm going to wrap it up from Lisa, where she's asking about childhood homes. I mean, I knew I was in direct contact with you, who had done your house that you grew up in inside white snow, reduced at 20% or 25%, like you made it slightly smaller, almost like what our memory can do to things and objects. And we could get into why you did that. And I mean, there's so many artists dealing with, from Mike Kelly's childhood home to Christophe Buchel, who did the House. Like I knew the context in which I was dealing with and some of my favorite artists, but my answer to Lisa, like I can't answer the question about the dollhouse, how I got there. It was such a long 8-year period. But the one thing I can say is I got there from multiple series of accidents, where then all of a sudden I realized the very thing I was trying to get to was right in my own bedroom. My mom had built a dollhouse for my daughter, and my daughter didn't want it in her room, so I had it in my bedroom. And it was, what could be more home than a mother's idea? Like I was striving so hard to recreate some sort of double with doubles in it, and mutated versions and softs and topology of a memory of something that no longer exists. And then all of a sudden there it was sitting. My mom had already done it. She had created this completely controllable space to the point that everything's glued down. You can't move it. Of her ideal environment. It's like a country house. And so when I was moving forward, I scanned it and recreated it to human size and started to work on that constellation therapy, which is your, German post-war Nazi guilt, where you work through your dead ancestors and their traumas. But I have to ask this and then we have to go, because they're telling me I'm not like a good, this is from Hector Torres. Freedom, maybe this is a good way to end. Freedom really, really resonates to me. I'm super high and feel so free when I'm high. I'm super free. I love you. My question is to Paul McCarthy, have you spoken to the universe about these things?
Every day. I don't think it goes anywhere else.
Oh, I love Hector. Thank you, Hector. Freedom,
Okay.
objectivity. Okay, I think we're done. They told me I had to finish by 6:50.
Are we done?
I don't know how this works, Paul. This is new to me. I'm excited that
I think
I
it's,
could. It almost feels like you're here. I need a beer.
we need a beer. We should have a beer.
Karen, give me beer.